Welcome back to the Michael Maher Show. Today is Friday, March 26, 2021. This is episode 50, and today I'm joined by the mayor of Radford, Virginia, David Horton. Thank you very much for joining me, Mayor Horton.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate you inviting me on the show and giving us a chance to have a conversation.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this conversation. And while doing a little research, I found that you're actually a graduate of Radford High School and Radford University.
Absolutely. I'm a Bobcat and a Highlander, and for the last, it's been 37 years, I've had a show on WVRU, the world's greatest radio station on the Radford University campus.
Yes, sir. And you've held several different positions at Radford, right?
I have. I've worked at Radford for almost 30 years. This is my 30th year, and I've been in a variety of different roles here on campus, ranging from the Alumni Association to student programming to the Dean of Students Office, and now to the Artists College of Science and Technology.
That's so awesome. So you're born and raised in Radford?
Yeah, in fact, this was my backyard growing up. I lived at the corner of Calhoun and Madison when dark side of campus was very, very few apartments, mostly residential housing. And it was during my early teen years that started to change. And so our family combined with the families on our block, and we all sold the whole block pretty much to an apartment complex. And so we all moved to West End Radford.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, I love this area so much. Just to talk to someone that's been here for so long and contributed so much to this community, it's great to finally get to speak with you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you want to jump right into the first topic, which
Absolutely.
is Radford politics. So just for everyone that may not know, what are your responsibilities as mayor? And also, if you just want to give us a rundown of a typical day in your life, please do so.
So as the mayor of the city, I am a member of the city council. I have a vote on council. There's 5 of us, and I have an equal share with the council. We have what's called the manager council form of government, which means we have hired a professional city manager to fulfill the executive function for our local government. In some larger communities, like in New York and San Francisco and Chicago and places like that, the mayor is also the chief executive officer, much like the president is the chief executive officer of the United States. In Radford, it's a little different. The mayor is a member of council and leads the council. The mayor is the political and figurehead of the city of Radford. But in terms of actual administration, the city manager runs the operation in ways that people might assume would belong to the mayor. Now, having said that, we work very, very closely, and I work closely with all my colleagues on our city council to determine priorities and funding and execution of our strategic plans for the city and how we address problems and are proactive with activities to make Radford a great place to be. A typical day for me there is no such thing as a typical day. There's usually something very early in the morning that we end up talking about that's sort of a issue of the day, issue of the week, issue of the month. Obviously, the last 12 months have been COVID. But there's a city to run, and there's nearly 20,000 people that live here between the full-time residents and the students that depend on this city to function regardless of what's going on, whether it's a snowstorm or COVID or some other crisis that may have come up. And so I kind of do a rundown and first thing in the morning to make sure that everything is in place where it needs to be, and if there's any support or anything I can help. I work a full-time job, so I work here at Radford University. So from 8 to 5, that's my primary responsibility. But then over the course of the day, there might be some things I'll check into, much like this, on my lunch hour, where I'm working to communicate about what's going on with the city and help share information. One of the most important things I can do as the mayor is to be transparent with our local government and to share as much information as possible. I believe you have checked out both my personal and probably my mayoral Facebook page, and you'll see that it's full of a lot of things about the city of Radford on a daily basis, whether it's official government press releases and information about what's going on, or promotions for our local businesses and citizens and things along that line. Communication is really a central part of what I can do as the mayor, both to the citizens of the community, to the outside world, and then also from those entities back to my fellow council members and to our city government.
Hmm. So back in 2018, what inspired you to run? Like where did you see that you could make changes?
Well, it goes back a lot further than 2018.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
Honestly, I had not anticipated running for council or mayor at this current time. I had sort of thought it would be something that would be off in my future, maybe even after I had retired from a full-time working position. You know, I might be working part-time, but I had retired and would have all the time in the world to dedicate to it because it's a 40+ hour a week job. It's just those hours take place in the evenings and on the weekends and in the early morning hours and at lunch hours and all of that. My story goes back a lot further than that. I'm from Radford originally, born and bred. My grandfather back in the 60s and 70s was the chief of police in Radford. My mom, of course, was a Radford High School graduate as well. And so I have long roots in this city. When I was in high school, I was actually in the Boy Scouts of America working on my citizenship in the community merit badge, and I attended my first city council meeting. I sort of was fascinated by how local government worked. You know, it's interesting to know that there's a process for everything and there's an intention behind almost everything that happens. And there are things that have to be dealt with, just like you do at the state level, just like you do at the federal level. That was my first entree into that world, and working through the Scouts and other volunteer organizations while I was in high school and college, I got to know more and more of the people and more of the activity within our community, which I encourage everybody to do. You know, get involved. Government is us. We are government. We are the ones who make those decisions for what happens in our communities. We're advocates for the things we're passionate about, and we have to be supporters and address the problems that are in our community that we identify. So for years, I was involved in that way. I was also served on boards and commissions over the years to help in different ways, whether it was environmental improvement, beautification and municipal forestry, the Chamber of Commerce, the Main Street program that we had in Radford at one time. I was involved in a lot of different ways for 30 years before I ran for office. Now, that helps inform the process considerably. I understand at a core level how things work. And in 2017, really, a lot of folks approached me. The mayor at the time, Bruce Brown, who was an absolutely outstanding political and community leader, was looking to retire. He had served as mayor for 8 years, after 8 years as a council member at large, and then he was ready to retire. So a number of folks reached out and said that we would really like you to consider this next level of service. It wasn't an easy decision to make because, as I said, to do it properly, from my perspective, takes the investment of a lot of time and energy, and I'm pretty busy with a lot of other things anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we ended up going down this path, and I thought I could make a difference. One of the things I thought I could really help with was the transparency and communication, changing the story about our community, being an ambassador for the city of Radford, helping folks understand why this is a great place to live, why it's a wonderful place to invest, what a fantastic community it is in so many ways, and sharing the stories of our citizens and our businesses and all of our organizations here in Radford. So I thought I could make a difference. And ultimately, I think everybody who gets involved in government in some way, shape, or form does so because they think this is something I can make a difference with. One of my mentors over the years was Bobby Nicholson, who served as a council member on multiple occasions with the city council. And he told me one time, you know, most people come to this because they're passionate about a single issue, whether it be the environment or jobs or roads or broadband or whatever it happens to be. And then you get on a council, you find yourself getting elected. And while that may be your passion, that's one of about 10,000 things that you have to know about and deal with and become an instant expert all the time to try to make good decisions for your community. So that's the piece that folks don't understand. And even after 30 years of being involved with the local government, I realized very quickly there were a lot of things that I didn't know once I was elected and took office. And so it takes a little time for a very steep learning curve to kick in.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you got in it for all the right reasons. And like you said, this area is just beautiful. It's very underrated. So I'm happy that you're leading it. But what has surprised you about the job so far, if anything?
This is a challenging era to be in local government, really in any level of government. There's a real vitriol among different sects within the population. We see it on a national level, we see it on a state level. The pandemic has exacerbated that. It makes it hard. People are unhappy and don't mind expressing it. Some of that is a byproduct of the availability of a platform through social media. It used to be when I was in high school, you had to have a radio station to broadcast yourself, or a TV station, or a newspaper to print your ideas to get them out to people. You could stand on a corner, there ought to be this, there ought to be that, I don't like this. But a lot of folks wouldn't listen to you. Now there's a platform for that. And so there is a tremendous amount of conversation that takes place. That can be a good thing. That can also be a challenging thing. One of the hardest things about working with folks today is folks can be suspicious of your motives regardless of where you are, what you're trying to do, and how you might explain your actions. So it's not an easy time to be in office. The pandemic has made all of that more challenging, because I do think folks struggle with some of the restrictions that have been put in place for public safety, some of the real difficulties that citizens and organizations and businesses have faced in the last 12 months. And there has been an amping up of a lot of the conversation, whether it be around race relations or around economic policy or a whole host of things that make it really hard to get by on a daily basis. 20 years ago, it was a very different animal leading a local government versus today. Now, that's good and bad. I think it's very important that people know what's happening and that they're engaged. And the more engagement you have, the more conversation and the more back and forth that will take place. That's great. I'm fine with that. In fact, the more ideas we have, the more discussion we have, the better off we all are. One of the biggest challenges we face is trying to find solutions to all these problems. And I'm a big believer in the hive mind being a great way to do some of that, that all of us are smarter than any one of us could ever be, because we all come from different perspectives. And when we distill all that down into a concept, when we find that common ground that we can all live on, typically that's the best way to approach many problems. And so we work to try to solve problems that way. But I would say the hardest thing and the most surprising thing has been the level of personal animosity toward almost anything that you try to do. We've had tremendous support, and there have been wonderful things happening in the last 2.5 to 3 years that hadn't really taken place for decades before. So there've been a lot of wonderful things that have gone on, and we've made tremendous progress from where we were. But the surprising part of that has been some of the voices who just simply don't want to see anything happen. Or if you do one thing, they wish something else had occurred. So that's part of the challenge that we face right now.
Now, this is just a random question, but I wanted to add it, include it in the outline. But if you received $1 million right now in funding for the city of Radford, how would you spend it?
Well, first thing we would do is look at our most emergent needs that we're not able to address. Every year, we receive millions of dollars in funding from taxes and state and federal aid that we allocate toward those things. So really, that's a daily, annual proposition, and we allocate them towards different things. One of the things right now that I am really focused on is helping us invest in the infrastructure of the city for the next iteration of what we will be. Communities go through different eras of who they are. Back many, many years ago, Radford was a railroad community and a factory town. And this was when there was a college here, but it was incredibly small. There were maybe a couple hundred students, a dozen faculty, and 2 or 3 buildings. So the school was in a very different position economically, socially, and culturally within the community. The railroad was incredibly large, and there were many, many employees that worked for the railroad. There were factories both in the East End with textile mills and different activities there, and in the West End with a little heavier manufacturing. Those things are all different now. The railroad is still here, but Radford is not a railroad hub. There aren't rail yards where they do a lot of work and employ hundreds, if not thousands of people. At one time, we had a foundry. We don't have a foundry in the city anymore. And textile manufacturing doesn't typically take place in communities in the United States at the level it did before. So all of those things changed, and we became the iteration that we are today, where the university is a huge driver for much of the activity in the city, although it's not the only one. Radford is a leader in motion control. Some of the most sophisticated motors in the world are made in the city of Radford, and there's about 1,000 people employed in manufacturing in our community. We make not only motors, we make some of the most state-of-the-art construction materials for high efficiency, high energy efficiency construction. We also make packaging materials through Huntington Industries. So there's a variety of things that are part of that. But what we're looking at is how things are evolving. You know, manufacturing is evolving, education is evolving. The way that a student receives their education today is going to be different in 5 years, 10 years, and it's different from even 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And so what we're looking at are what are those things that we can put in place with the seeds, the dollars that we have today, that will reap a great harvest in the future, that will give us the ability for better economic improvement. So we are currently conducting a study of downtown Radford with the Regional Commission, the New River Valley Regional Commission, that is funded by an Appalachian Regional Commission grant to help us explore the use of the buildings, the look of our downtown, sidewalks, lighting, access, parking, all of those elements, to make that as economically positive and as socially and culturally positive as it can be. So if I had $1 million after that study comes back, I might repave the roads, improve the sidewalks, add plant material, add lights, do a matching grant program, a whole host of things like that. One of the things that's on our radar is looking to help Radford be that cultural center for the New River Valley in many ways, and have arts and entertainment, outdoor activity, utilization of the riverfront and the trails and the parks. And all of that could also be worthy of investment. And those are things that we're looking at over the next few years to enhance, so that those folks, that 100,000 folks or so that live within a 20 to 30-minute drive of downtown Radford, might choose to come into the city more often to eat and shop and do business, but also for people to want to invest in the city, whether they're investing in homes or some of the business buildings or building their own opportunity here. So the bottom line of what you asked was, what would I do with $1 million? It's to try to plant the seeds for the future and what Radford is going to become over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years.
Yeah. I have so much optimism for the city of Radford in the next 20 years. Like, I don't know. I just can't wait to see this area grow. Because when my sister, because I have two sisters that graduated from Radford, and the first one graduated in 2013, I believe. And when she came and dropped me off my freshman year at Muse, and she was just looking around, she was astonished at how much it had already changed in such a short amount of time. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to coming back 5 years from now or 10 years from now, whenever I graduate, and just seeing the improvements in the city. But what are a few things that a lot of people come to you and wish you spent the budget on? If there's like a common thing, like one common thing.
Well, you can never have enough money for paving. You know, roads are always a challenge. Infrastructure will eat you up, essentially, as a community. To create a mile of road costs about $1 million. And that's
Really?
from laying the groundwork to building the side infrastructure with sidewalks and curbing to actually paving it with asphalt. So you can really spend money on just the daily basics that make a neighborhood nice 24/7, 365.
Mm-hmm.
We are working on two major projects this next year that are multi-year, multi-phased projects. In West Radford along Main Street, we're looking at Main Street, we're looking at a program that I'm calling the West Project, the West End Street Treatment, where we're going through and improving sidewalks, many of which have not been touched for 80 years, doing some paving and curbing improvements, improving lighting so that it's better quality and more frequent lighting so that it provides a general brightness in the evening and overnight hours. And then also looking at some of the plant materials that are there to provide a little more park-like and natural resource. The East End project is taking place. We're investing in our water and sewer infrastructure because that's something you have to constantly work toward in the modern era, because some of that stuff, again, is 70, 80, 100 years old, and you replace what you can, you repair what you have to, and then you try to do proactive things that keep issues that occur from becoming major citywide issues. You localize them as much as possible. So one of the things we're spending money on that is not sexy or exciting, but it really makes a big difference, are insertion valves, which allow you to shut water off to a specific area. It allows the rest of the system to pressurize. And let's say you have a break because the ground has shifted. It's getting warmer, or it's getting colder, and there's a break on Main Street in the 200 number block. You can block it off so the 100 and 300 blocks are taken care of, and you've just localized to those couple of residents or businesses that might have the water outage. While that doesn't seem like a big deal, it is a big deal when everybody else in the city can get a shower that morning, can run their laundry, can keep their business going and doing that. So people always want investment in the infrastructure that affects their lives, whether it is the roads that they're driving on, the power that comes to their home, the water and sewer that serves them, or for things they're passionate about. If someone is very active in youth sports, they want to see soccer fields and baseball fields and basketball courts and football fields invested in all the time because they see that direct piece with that. So you have a lot of folks that have a variety of interests. And what we try to do is put a little money in each of those areas every year, all the time. And so we're constantly looking to either repair, make improvements, or create new where we can. And so that's a little bit of everything that we do. But that's what I was talking about. When you're a single issue politician, when you're a single issue candidate, and you come to this role thinking, I'm going to make the roads in Radford better, and we're going to pave everything over the next year. Well, then you find out that costs $75-80 million, which is more than the city budget, and that there's no way you could do it in a year's time, even if you had the money, because of the availability of paving crews and asphalt and the disruption to the city, and that the parks need money and that the library and schools need money and all of that. That's how you learn more and you go from there.
Wow, that sounds incredibly efficient, the way that you sectioned off the money. And it's important, like you said, I mean, that people are able to use water throughout their day, throughout their morning, and you can just specifically target one area. So, and like you said, it's just, you're not gonna be able to satisfy everyone. So if you can slowly make people happy bit by bit, but it seems like you're doing a fine job so far. But since you became mayor, is there any exact memorable conversations or people that you've met or actions that you've been a part of that you can pinpoint to, for us?
Well, I'm really proud of all the progress we've been able to make since I was fortunate enough to serve as mayor. We rebranded the city. You may have seen our logo, the Radford VA logo that we created, and we worked with a designer to do. That took more time and energy than we thought it would. We thought that would be something boom, boom, boom. Let's just get it done in the first month or two, the first 6 months. It took a year. And many things that you think are going to take less time take longer. And for us, that process was knowing to say no to some of the ideas that were offered up until we got to the right yes. Many times in government, that's one of your biggest tasks, is knowing the things that you can't agree to when you're getting towards something bigger and getting toward the right solution for the long term. There are a million conversations. I hear from folks all the time. I try to make myself very available for conversation, for people to express their concerns. We have a wonderful team working for the city to solve problems, but many times the question from person A doesn't get to city official B until we can have some sort of conduit. And sometimes I'm that conduit. There are folks who've told me they've seen more difference in the city of Radford in the last couple of years than they did during the entire time they've lived here, whether that be a decade or a lifetime. And that's very rewarding. personal things that I've done that have been really great conversations. Last year in 2020, I felt like it was important that we begin to share more of the stories of non-majority populations in our community so that they're elevated to another level and that people can become aware of their contributions and their success and their stories throughout the city. So this past Black History Month in February, I made a concerted effort to recognize a different person in Radford Black history every day. And we're continuing that series. There's so many people. We're continuing that series throughout the course of the year, throughout the course of the next few years. But the idea was to celebrate those stories that maybe some folks didn't know and to document them in some way, working through members of the community to really help share a story. I was shocked by the level of appreciation for the simple little social media posts that I was able to help put together with the assistance of many other people to celebrate people. There was such an appreciation because they felt like their voices had not been heard previously, and that through that act, which is just one piece of a greater whole, that they were being heard at a little bit higher level, that there was a celebration. And we're working on a lot of things like that. One of the things I stated before I ran for office and that I have continued to state is that we all must be ambassadors of our community and the things that we care about. If we don't share the stories, if we don't carry forward the message, if we don't carry the banner for our community to move forward, nobody else is going to do that for us. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to find our way of being able to do that. Whether you're a photographer and you take wonderful pictures of the community that help share the Radford story and enrich the lives of the people that see them, or you're a writer and you come up with profiles and history, or you're a videographer and you create videos, or you're a radio host and you host radio programs to allow the oral tradition to take place. Every one of us have a role in making this community a success. And a team makes the lift very light for each person, but the ability to make a change very, very, very strong.
Yeah. I love how inclusive your mindset is. Like, if we all, like you said, if we all just work together and we all know our part and we all stick to what we're best at, and like you said, we all work together, it's just, this area is just going to take off.
Folks love to brag about where they're from, right? They want to talk about their hometown. They want to talk about the things that they felt were important in their background, in their locality. And this gives people an opportunity to do that, to be able to share these really cool stories that just give such a rich tapestry of the community's history. And it's wonderful that we all get to experience that.
Yeah. Like you said, there's some great people out there, and just because they don't have a super popular business, like you said, a lot of people don't hear their stories, but I mean, they're just important as anyone else, and they definitely have a lot going for them and a lot on their plate. So, but yeah, now for some random topics / questions. Did you make a March Madness bracket? This is my podcast is usually sports based, but you didn't?
I didn't. And it was probably good because I don't think anybody has fared very well in this March Madness. I'll tell you when I make a March Madness bracket. When Radford University is in the tournament, I make a bracket, and every time Radford is winning it all. So
yep, that's
I'm a Highlander through and through, and I bleed tartan plaid. So yeah, I didn't do it this year. And it's been interesting though, following it, where people have been so stunned by the victories of the underdogs, which is kind of cool. I mean, it is an interesting spectacle to watch. And I know a lot of people's brackets got busted very early on. But yeah, it's fascinating. How'd you do? How's your bracket going?
Mine did not turn out well. So my bracket was basically busted after the second game of the entire tournament, third game of the entire tournament. I had Ohio State going to the championship, and I talked about it on my last podcast, and I was saying, I think Ohio State, and then they ended up losing to a 15 seed. So yeah, my bracket didn't last long. So yeah, you definitely didn't miss out on much, because I don't think there's a single perfect bracket, and we're only in the second round.
Right. Let's talk about bracketology for a minute, though. It is a fascinating subject as people try to weigh the odds. It can be as simple as someone saying, well, I'm going to support all the Virginia teams, or, I'm a huge Ohio State fan, so I'm going to make sure they get all the way through the tournament. It's a little bit of wishful thinking for some of it. Some of it is very well reasoned, that because of this competition and this participation and this outcome in a previous game, this is why I think this is going to happen. I find it fascinating. Some of the people who have done the best with brackets are people that know absolutely nothing about basketball, right? They're like, ooh, I like the name of that team, I'm going to make them win, and they have neat colors, I'm going to put them first. So it's interesting because there is no prescribed way. Now, having said that, I think when you go back through history, most of the time, the number 1 or number 2, and sometimes the number 3 seeds, typically they will make up the most of the Elite 8 and the Final 4. Usually that system has proven to be true, especially if it's been a pretty thorough basketball season and some teams were incredibly dominant during the regular season. COVID, of course, has changed everything. And that has to be factored in. I think that's changed not only the way teams play and the actual teammates who are on the floor at any one time, but also the mindset, because it's not in front of fans. You don't have the Cameron crazies out there making a difference in some of the big games throughout the course of the year. And I think all of that has impacted it. So it's been very fascinating to watch as things have evolved over the last year. But I'm always happy to talk sports. I'm not only a fan of sports themselves, have kind of a love-hate relationship at times. I'm really interested in the business of sports. And again, there's a love-hate relationship there as well. And we can go into that if you're interested.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. What's on your mind about that?
There's probably more money in both collegiate and professional sports than there's ever been in the history of the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are literally billions of dollars. I think I read a story that said the NFL was preparing a new contract for 10 years at $100 billion. It is beyond insane. $10 billion a year average for 30 teams to split up.
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling. But at the same time, this is where local government comes in, and certainly not just at the Radford level, but at all levels. Local governments are asked to shoulder more and more and more of the burden of helping a sports team in their community, whether it be a basketball arena or a football stadium or baseball park, whatever it happens to be. And it's kind of stunning. And it has been an interesting evolution. You go back 100 years and almost all those teams were bankrolled by their owners. The locality didn't give them much of anything. They might pave a road and add some plumbing and wiring so they'd have better water and electricity, but they didn't own the ballpark. That started to shift in the mid 20th century. And then today, I don't know of many ballparks or many, sports projects that don't have a public component. And there's a real debate about that, because localities are saying, does this make sense for us to spend $100 million for a team that has $10 billion in revenue a year? For us as a locality to issue our debt and our bonds and to put our energy there, when we could certainly put that towards schools and roads and infrastructure and parks and other
things that benefit the community more.
How does it, and that is a question mark. One of the most fascinating recent case studies for me has been the Atlanta Braves. I don't know. Are you a Braves fan? Do you follow them very much?
I'm not a huge baseball fan.
So they received a deal back in the mid 90s with Turner Field, the original Turner Field. It was originally the Olympic Stadium. And when Atlanta made its bid to be an Olympic host city, that was the stadium. And then usually when they have all these facilities, they have to do something with them after the Olympics. And the plan was for it to be converted into a baseball stadium. Sometimes those conversions never work quite right. And Turner Field always had a few little challenges with it. But the biggest challenge with it was the neighborhood. And because the neighborhood around it was privately owned, there was little that could be done to easily transform the neighborhood into a big economic engine. Well, the thing in sports now is not just to have the stadium, not just to have the luxury suites, not just to have the parking concession and all the meals and food and everything that takes place. It's to have the entire district around it. So you'll have a hotel, you'll have a convention center, you'll have restaurants and shops. And so Atlanta wanted that. And where they were in downtown Atlanta said, we just really can't justify spending $1 billion on this project. So the Braves moved, I think maybe 20 miles to Cobb County. They're still the Atlanta Braves, but they moved to a nearby county where they could get literally a city for their ballpark. And the reason they want that so much is that revenue doesn't have to be shared with the other teams. It's not baseball direct revenue, but it's 12-month revenue. And those would typically be revenues that would go to private businesses, and the taxes from that would pay for schools and roads and all those things. That's something that's evolving in our society. Now, I do think that the new Rams stadium in LA is being privately financed, and it's a little different. They still are going to have a whole district. It truly is a city within a city. And that's what you're seeing more and more with sports teams, that they want the arena, the immediate surrounding neighborhood, and sometimes 2 or 3 blocks outside of that for hotels and all the ancillary revenue that takes place. That's a huge change. Yeah. And that's something we haven't seen. Again, if they're doing this privately and they're doing this as just an independent business person, a billionaire who wants to buy these things and make them better, I'm a little more agnostic about it. But when it's city money, when it's locality money, boy, does that become a real challenge for the locality when they're looking at crumbling sidewalks and schools that could use money and other areas that need support. That makes it really hard. So this is something that as a society, we're going to have to come to a reckoning with. And it's a hard argument to make. I get it. Nobody wants to lose their team, because that can have an economic impact as well. When a team brings in, 60 to 80,000 fans per game. And for baseball, that can be 80 times a year. That makes a huge difference to a district, and that creates a lot of economic activity. You're always looking for those things that get people to come out and spend money and spend time and energy in a place, and it's quality of life. You want to live there because you love going to those ball games, but it starts to get to a point of declining returns. So I kind of combined sports and government a little bit here, because this is one of the big questions that I do think we're going to have to answer in the next 30 years as more and more stadiums that were built in the 90s and 2000s start to come up for reconsideration. Turner Field was 22 years old when they made the deal for the new Atlanta Braves ballpark. The bonds hadn't even been paid off. When the St. Louis Rams ended up going back to Los Angeles, the stadium in St. Louis, the bonds still haven't been paid for completely yet from what St. Louis invested in their public gift to the Rams. So this is something that I think localities are going to have to address, is at what point does it not make sense for them to invest at that level? And where should that burden fall on the truly multi-billionaires who are making the decision, so that they can pay the millionaires, multi-millionaires, the salaries that they pay? And the same thing is happening with colleges and universities in some of the biggest programs, that you start to see where it may have been a downtown like Radford, where you might have a Sharkies or a BTs or a McAdoo's, and then you have sports activity around that. Some schools want not only the arena that they might build, but they want to own through their foundation or through some sub-organization all the restaurants and shops that are related to it, so that all that revenue comes to them as well. So a little bit off topic.
One
of those
I love
things that I think is a fascinating discussion from a policy standpoint of where are we? How much subsidy do we provide to billionaires for something that the community may decide they want, but you get to a point where it's going to be a declining return on that investment, and does it make sense? So that's one of those that's interesting. There's probably way more than you wanted to know about that.
No, it's fun.
But I truly believe that's going to impact sports in a way none of us anticipate. There could be relocations. There could be all kinds of issues with lots of very successful teams, or even some teams that are horrible, but are getting billions of dollars in benefits that want to stay, move, evolve, whatever it happens to be. So money, money, money. It always changes everything. And it's always at the heart because it is the lifeblood of so much activity, next to the passion of the people that are involved. So anyway, I went on too long about that. What else you want to talk about?
No, you're fine. Like you said, the cost of these new stadiums is insane. Like SoFi Stadium, where the Rams are going to be playing, or they played there last year, but they haven't opened up the fans yet. But that was like a $1.4 billion stadium. Mm-hmm. And nowadays, a lot of stadiums, they're not necessarily accommodating for like more capacity in the arena. They're trying to accommodate to like extra stuff around the stadium to make it more enjoyable for the experience of the fan. But $1.4 billion, and the new stadium, Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, was similar in cost. And it's just so much money when you break it down.
Tale of two stories. The SoFi Stadium was privately funded. Mm-hmm. There were some government subsidies for the land around it. Excuse me. There were some government subsidies for the land around it and for the access. The stadium in Las Vegas was publicly funded. They lured the Raiders from Oakland with literally billions of gambling dollars, if nothing else, to get them into Las Vegas. And so I think you're going to see more stories like that. Now, Oakland is a totally different story. The Raiders were in a substandard stadium for years, but they could have afforded to build their own space. They could have done whatever they wanted to with that had they really wanted to. It does start to come to the point of, where does the locality come into this, whether you're a locality like New York or San Francisco or Radford, Virginia. At what point do you subsidize private business to have that happen in your community? Every business that comes into a community typically gets some level of some kind of subsidy that taxpayers help support. That's just a reality. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because you look at, it generates jobs, it's quality of life many times. It helps encourage people to live in that locality. And then that creates taxes and other activity and other revenues. So it's a complicated thing to talk about, but those are two really great examples to look at because they were handled in totally different ways. Stan Kroenke, who's the developer and the owner for the Rams, he's a billionaire business developer anyway. And so for him, this was his wheelhouse, for building a stadium and the surrounding ancillary businesses. The Raiders were a football company. You know, they're family owned, and they pretty much are a football company. And so they were looking for the best deal they could get. They weren't interested in development, and they could have, but that's not their forte.
Yeah. Now, there's been so many new stadiums that have been built over the last 5 years in the NFL and a few in the NBA. Now, what impact do you think the Olympics and the World Cup coming to the U.S. in a couple of years has had on that? Do you think that has any part of the reason as to why these stadiums are being built in preparation for that, or no?
I think that they use those things as rationale for getting the new stadiums, but no, I don't believe that is the reason that they're coming about. It's the excuse that is used. And actually, in fairness, yes, there will be economic activity. SoFi Stadium, I think, will end up hosting significant Olympic events, I believe. I know the Coliseum is planned to be the primary location, and that is a city-owned facility in Los Angeles from 1930s, from the
that's where the Rose Bowl
early
was for
1930s,
many
1932. But I don't think that if those things weren't happening, that these stadiums wouldn't happen. These stadiums are happening because of the sheer volume of dollars that can come from them. A person who may be worth $100 million can become a multi-billionaire by getting one of these stadiums put in place, because they can make the budget for their team to pay all the players. But the ancillary revenue, like I said, the Braves Stadium deal is a perfect example. They'll make more as a company from the surrounding businesses than they will from the baseball team. And that will be their profit. And that's how they can grow. That's why all this is happening. Again, I'm a big believer in private enterprise. That's been one of the wonderful foundations of America. But at some point, when it is subsidized so heavily by local governments, you have to start to question, what are the citizens getting out of it? Do they own a little piece of it? If all the tax revenue, because many times that's what happens, the businesses want all the sales and meals tax that's generated by those restaurants and hotels to come back to them. At some point, you get into, again, that declining return, because unless it generates all new business, it's probably taking away from that restaurant that's 5 miles away from there or 3 miles away from there. And if that's the case, then the locality is actually losing revenue overall. So it's very complicated. I do think it's wonderful to have more things that drive more economic activity. The more economic activity you can have, the better it is for everybody, because then people can hire more folks. They can spend money on their rents. They can buy groceries. They can buy gasoline. They can do those things that continue to generate more and more and more activity in a community. There's a balance, though. And that's where communities, I think, are struggling with exactly where does that balance lie. I think all of the commissioners in Cobb County got voted out of office after they made the deal for the Braves. I'm not 100% on that, but I've been following that story, and I believe that was what occurred afterwards, that the voters said, this is nuts. You gave away the store. We love having the Braves here, but not at that price. And again, as long as another community is willing to take that gamble, the teams are going to look to relocate. And that has been a threat for many years. The Vegas thing is a huge experiment, because baseball teams especially have threatened to relocate to Las Vegas for years. The reason sports teams originally did not go to Las Vegas was because of the strong gambling influence. And at the time, they didn't want to be perceived as beholden to the gambling industry, that someone might suspect their moves and motives were related to the point spread. Well, that world has changed. You can gamble everywhere now. FanDuel, whatever it happens to be. I mean, it's gambling,
still growing at a rapid rate.
And that's not necessarily a healthy thing, but it is what it is. The decision has been made that that's going to occur at a higher level. And so that factors into a lot of this as well. So I do see Vegas potentially having a baseball team in the next few years, and I don't think it'll necessarily be an expansion team. I could see a team that is unhappy with the deal in their city relocating to Las Vegas. And I can see that potentially happening with some of the other sports leagues. They have hockey, and now they have football, and seeing the attendance levels for those and the support will be crucial to seeing where it goes from there.
Yeah. The Golden Knights expanding there and the success that they had immediately. I mean, went to the Stanley Cup in their first season. And I actually visited Vegas a couple months ago, and I was talking with a local while I was there, and he said the excitement and energy of the city when the Knights, or when the Golden Knights, when they went to the playoffs, he said the atmosphere in the city was just awesome. And then eventually the Raiders came, and they haven't even opened it up to fans yet. So truthfully, we don't know how supportive the city will be of the Raiders. But I mean, I'm sure attendance will be great. But yeah, like you said, I could definitely see a baseball team, a basketball team, and any other sports you could think of expanding there in the future.
You know it. And I will say this, the fact that the Golden Knights in their rookie season could go to the Stanley Cup actually underscores the problems with hockey.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, you shouldn't be able to do that. I mean, they bought a team, which is great. They bought the players, which is what's allowable. But is that what you really want? Whoever has the biggest budget wins the championship. That to me, as a sports fan, that's kind of stinky. I mean, I don't want to just see this be about dollars. You want to see it be about organization and structure. And like, I'm an Orioles fan, so I know pain, right? The Orioles haven't been good for a long time. But before the Angelos era with the Orioles, there was the Oriole Way, and they had numerous players who came all the way from the rookie teams to the major league team that they developed. And it was based on hard work and dedication. They identified talent early and then developed that talent rather than just going out and spending money on marquee players. Baseball is the trickiest one to do that in because of the length of the season and the way baseball kind of ends up working out. But for other sports, I think that's problematic. Tampa Bay, a little bit like that this last year. You know, they brought in the Tom Brady success, and you can't discount the fact that they paid a significantly higher price for their team to make that happen. the bottom line of it is a lot of people don't care how they got there. They just want to get there. They want to get to the pinnacle, at least compete for the championship, if not win it. But I don't think it's necessarily healthy for sports for it to just be about the dollars and just be about who has the biggest payroll winning the championship, because what that will do is preclude some teams from even having a shot. Now, that's not true in every place, but you can almost see that with the Lakers. You know, they assembled a dream team. The Warriors a few years ago did the same thing. They paid for a lot of marquee players, and they were able to win it because they had simply the best players on the payroll. So I think sports teams are going to have to deal with that. Hockey experiences it worse than others because I think hockey is more susceptible to some of those issues. They're the smallest of the four leagues, and I think they struggle with some of that. But it's fascinating. I mean, isn't that weird to you that in their first season, a team can go all the way?
Yeah.
It's a neat story, but it's also kind of strange. It's not like they're a ragtag team of misfits who got plucky and won it all. You know, you go out after the biggest players.
It'll be interesting to see how much hockey grows in the coming years, because I believe starting next year, a deal was just announced last week that now ESPN will be covering I want to say it was like 48 to 50% of hockey games, along with NBC Sports Network. So yeah, now that the worldwide sports leaders covering them, and they'll be televised more often, and they'll be posted on their Instagram accounts and everything. It'll be interesting to see how much hockey can grow. But yeah, like you said, it's very odd that a team in their first season can go that far. But I think that's because the process of the expansion team was weird. Like, you were able to draft like certain players from teams, so they were just like hand selecting people and kind of just assembling like an all-star team, you could say. So
well, that's it. And is that what's best for the league? I mean, maybe some people would say it's awesome that it provides for all kinds of levels of competition. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert in it. If I were a Vegas fan, I'd be thrilled that occurred so quickly. I think they wanted to show success right away, so they had to do something to make that happen. But it starts to get to some of the underlying problems, because you have weak franchises that literally will have no shot at that unless they can get a community to bankroll a huge deal for them and they move to that community. And then as part of that, they get some deal from the league where they get to get new players, right? You know, that's how some teams do that. But the long and the short of it all, I do think that you mentioned some interesting things. Yes, ESPN is the worldwide leader, but the market is getting so segmented. Everybody's got a streaming channel. Almost every game can be seen everywhere at any time. Everything's getting divided up a whole lot more. Everybody has a podcast now, right? You know,
there's only like 2 million or something.
Like I said, when I was growing up, you had to have a radio station to be able to broadcast yourself. You can create this podcast and put it out there, and the entire world can pick it up. That's a difference. Now, how you get that attention can be tricky, but it's still the possibility of that happening. I think that's going to be the big challenge with sports. Will we even care? Will there be a central element to it? One of the reasons the Super Bowl has been such a premier event, or the World Series or the Stanley Cup, is it's something that has kind of gelled around the entire population. There are fewer and fewer of those things that exist that way. Everything's so segmented. They still can make billions of dollars from it because there's so many people that have access to it, but it's a different thing from what it used to be. Because when the Super Bowl was on, when it first came on, it was literally on 2 channels at the same time. 2 networks covered it. It was all that was on, you know? So like it's a different world. And I think it's fascinating. It gives more opportunity, but there's a ton more competition for those eyeballs and for that energy. And, you know, you've got 75,000 streaming channels to watch it on. And, you know, just being on ESPN, if ESPN is one of 100 streaming channels that you have, and there's a sports network for every possible sport and network, it becomes crowded. Yeah.
Streaming has definitely changed the game completely, and not just for sports, but for movies, TV shows. I mean, I remember the days going to Blockbuster and picking out a VHS tape and then going back home. And if I was halfway through it, having to go back and rewind it. And now it's just all from the comfort of your home on that little teeny tiny flat screen TV. It's incredible to see the advancements technology has made in such a short amount of time. Because I mean, streaming has only been around for a handful of years so far. I mean, at least like predominantly.
It's
And
an evolving market for sure. And I think it does change everything. You know, one of the nice things about so many media channels, going back to the earliest part of our discussion, is the chance to get your message out there and
yeah,
to use the resources that are available to you to share your story, the story of those that are around you. That's pretty fascinating. By the way, I'll give you my pitch. I have a billion-dollar idea for the NFL. I can never get them to pay attention to it. It's called Super Bowl Superstar. You know, there's always a debate every year, right, during the Super Bowl about the halftime show. Some
yeah,
people are like, oh, that's the most awesome thing ever. And others are like, who? Why? Why'd they pick them? What's going on? So I said, what if for content that the NFL did a competition with bands and singers, kind of like an American Idol type thing, but it's called Super Bowl Superstar. And during the 16 weeks, now going to be 17 weeks of the NFL season, they went through a process with the regional games, because you got, 30 cities that are NFL cities. You could have auditions in all those cities. You show those things during half times of many of the games. You let the fans actually support the bands they like. You get down to a final 8 or a final 4 at playoff time. And then it's a playoff for the Super Bowl Superstar too. The day of the Super Bowl, you have your big Super Bowl Superstar perform at halftime.
that's a brilliant idea.
Celebrity superstar. That's content. You have to think about it this way. The NFL Network and all its ancillary channels could broadcast that content for profiles on the performers and the bands. You could have country versus rock versus rap versus all these things, to where you get to whatever that new superstar is. And then they're in an audience of 1 billion people for one of their first debuts.
Yeah.
So you have literally created that, and it's truly just using the resources that already exist. The NFL already has all the support resources in all these markets. They have the stadiums to hold the activities in.
Yeah.
They have the Super Bowl platform. I mention this every year at the Super Bowl time.
That's a great idea.
I'm waiting for the NFL commissioner to call me and say, David, that
This
is
might
our
be it.
new $1 trillion idea. But copyright David Horton. But no, I do think something like that's interesting. And again, it's about leveraging those media channels that are available to them. They have eyeballs because of what they do. And yet there are things that they could still do that give them ancillary markets. I mean, think about that. Your local band, let's say you're from Washington and it's a DC favorite that plays in Georgetown or in Old Town or wherever it happens to be, and they get a chance to compete to be the Super Bowl halftime show. That's pretty darn cool. And you're going to be invested in that. You're going to follow their progress through that system.
That's so much more exposure also, not only for the bands and artists, but for the league, because let's say you're supporting a local band that is performing at halftime, but you don't necessarily watch football. You watch the halftime show, and then you're like, man, I'm not doing anything the rest of the day. I'll watch the rest of this game. And then the NFL may have just gained a new fan after that.
Exactly. One of the reasons they program some of the artists they do at the playoffs and at the halftime of the Super Bowl is to bring in the non-traditional football fans. This is a way to expand that effort really 100-fold, because you do it the entire season. Now, you're not going to have 1 billion people for a Washington versus Tampa game in August. I get that. Mm-hmm. But if people in those markets are watching the game and they see their local performers looking to get a spot, that could be their brothers and sisters, that could be their sons and daughters, that could be their neighbors. And then suddenly you've created, again, this whole other culture within the NFL that it's a true ancillary business. No other sports league could do it that way. I mean, baseball could do something similar, but they don't have the venue at the end of the season that would be kind of that crowning moment for that. The World Series is, but do you do it during game one? Is it something that happens all throughout? There is no real halftime. Do they sing the national anthem? By the way, that's the runner-up gets to do the national anthem at the Super Bowl, and the winner
gets another good idea.
Yeah. So you solve both of those problems at once, and you basically have created your whole new industry. Anyway, it's not like I haven't thought about this a lot. So, but I do think it's one of those interesting things that with the media saturation we have nowadays, and with the opportunity, if you can get eyeballs to something, you have the opportunity to leverage that toward a lot of different possibilities. And again, I'll take it back to our initial discussion. You can use that to put the spotlight on so many other things. For example, a big part of that could be that the NFL gives a lot of the proceeds from this thing back to the locality where the band came from, back to things that the band cares about. When you're telling the story of the band, you're telling the story of the community that they came from. You're helping to uplift maybe a small town that's 30 miles outside of Chicago, or a suburb of St. Louis, or whatever it happens to be. There are ways to take this to such a high level that benefits hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people. And using that platform to do that could be wonderful in so many ways. And again, they can still have the celebrities be a part of it. With shows like American Idol or some of the dance shows and things, they usually pair them with a celebrity mentor of some kind. So you could still have Lady Gaga or the Black Eyed Peas or, whoever you want to be the mentor, and they perform with that person. But you've created something really kind of cool that there is no stage like that in the world beyond what they're able to offer.
I would love to see that. That'd be revolutionary. That would be, that would totally change the game and potentially change the direct avenue artists go down. I mean, some artists might specifically want to get that type of exposure. And I don't know, that's very interesting. I love that idea. But before we wrap up, because I have to run to class in a little bit.
Sorry, I
no,
didn't know what you were getting into here. I'm a long talker, so
no, don't worry about it. I'd definitely love to catch up again and maybe do another interview in down the line.
Anytime.
Yeah, because this has just been a fascinating conversation. It's gone all over the place, but I absolutely love it. I mean, I've been invested in it the entire time. But before we wrap up, I always ask my guests this at the end of the show. What is one piece of advice that you can give to everyone watching or listening? And it could be any type of advice.
Find something you're passionate about and spend a good portion of your life supporting it. Find something that you think you can make a difference with and get behind it, because that will enrich your life and it will enrich the lives of your neighbors and the people that you care about. One of the things that I see all the time is that many things that are good in a community and a commonwealth like Virginia and a country like the US are there because people did something to make them happen. It didn't just happen automatically. It didn't just happen magically, that someone was passionate about it and they led the charge for it. They supported it and they told the story and they got others engaged in it. If everybody does that for the things that they truly care about, what a wonderful world this could be.
Yeah. And for people that may be struggling to find their passion, because most of my listeners are college aged people. So what advice would you have to them to potentially find their passion?
Open your eyes, look around, and volunteer. There's almost always an opportunity to do something, whether you're helping at a local clothing bank or working at a food pantry, even just picking up trash in a park or looking to be a part of a local government. You can do that. You can contribute. You can go to a council meeting. You can make your voice heard on an issue. You can volunteer a couple of hours a week with something you think you might have an interest in. Sometimes it's doing a self-inventory of what do you actually really care about. And sometimes it's sampling, trying a lot of different things to see what fits. It can be that one week you're going to help with a environmental improvement project, whether you're either cleaning or fixing up or building something new. Another week you're helping at a daycare center and you're volunteering a couple hours there. It's all up to you. You just have to take the initiative and open your eyes and look around and say, I wonder if they could use a little bit of help. Again, one of the easiest ways to do that is to look up your local government meetings. All local governments have a web page of some kind where they publicize their local government meetings, both in terms of like a city council meeting or school board or boards and commissions that serve many functions. Find out when those meetings are, and those are typically open to the public. Now, COVID's a little challenging. You might be able to join on Zoom, but be aware and get involved. That's how you do it. It's really not that much harder than that. It takes a little bit of time to investigate, takes a little time to invest, but you literally look around you and say, where could I make a difference and how do I get started?
Yeah. I love it that also at the top of your answer that you specified volunteering, because from my experience, some of my fondest memories and some of the best people that I've met have been through volunteer work. And, so yeah, and
you might find a career that way. One of the things is don't define yourself by what you do to make money. You are a combination of all things that you're passionate about. And your avocation may be the thing that you spend the majority of your non-working time doing. You may have a job where you make money, but if you can turn that avocation into your vocation, and find a way to actually work for the things you care about, then life becomes that much richer. And I've seen that happen with students. Too often, I think students feel adrift because they don't have those things that they're passionate about. When you have those elements that you're contributing to something, when you're doing something positive, you feel positive at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, and it changes the course of your life.
Yeah, that's it's deep. I mean, but it's the truth. I mean, yeah, a lot of people just really struggle to find their passion, including myself. I mean, I didn't really know what I was passionate about until I got to college. And like you said, just experimenting and trying out a lot of different things and knowing what you like and what you don't like is vital to ultimately finding that. But I mean, I still
Absolutely.
struggle to I mean, because I'm always looking for different passions. I mean, I think it's
Sure.
important to be passionate about multiple things because I don't know, it just keeps you busy. I think having
Well,
a
this
busy
is
schedule.
a topic for a whole other conversation, but I also believe in mentorship. And I think looking for people who can guide you with that and give you some support is really important. Find a mentor, someone you think who might have had a little experience that you would want to glean some information from. They can help you find those pathways that maybe you wouldn't find on your own. So that's a whole other topic. We can
Yeah,
talk
I
about
would love to
mentorship
discuss
for
that
another
with you.
hour or something down the road.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna say I would love to
you know,
discuss that with you again.
what you're doing right here, this could be a passion for you, sharing stories, talking with people, engaging, and then sharing that with the world. You know, I mentioned that I do a radio show. That's one of my favorite things to do. And my show can be music, it can be talk, it can be performance. It just depends on
Mhm.
what we want it to be. But by doing that and sharing it with the world, I enrich somebody else's life. It is a
Exactly.
super way to help make those things happen in the world. So what you're doing right now can be a way to engage and you find out more about something, but you also share a story, which your listeners, your viewers may be able to find out something.
Thank you very much for joining me on this episode. And like we said, we'll definitely have to catch up because I would love to speak with you more on mentorship and a couple maybe other sports related questions, and then maybe a couple more political questions as well. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me, Mayor Horton.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anytime. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this, and
Of course.
we'll talk frequently. And I just have to say, go Radford.
Go Radford, 100%. Well, guys, thank you very much for listening or watching, whichever one you guys did. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Today was Friday, March 26, 2021. This was episode 50. I'm happy that we finally made it to 50 episodes. But yes, like I said, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Mayor Horton, for joining me. We'll definitely be keeping in touch. But that's all I got to say, guys. I'm your host of this show, Michael Marr, and have a great weekend.